Welcome to the Revenue Doctor podcast. My name is Josh today, and we have a special guest for you today, Martin Devon. He is a workshop facilitator and business coach. He specializes in B2C, B2B businesses, anywhere from 1 million in revenue up to, I think, about 10 million in revenue. It's sort of a sweet spot, but I know he does a lot more than that. The reason he's a special guest for us today is, they say, I did a quick ChatGPT search, Martin, and by the time you're 44, you've met about 50 to 75,000 people. So it's a fair amount of people. And Martin Devon is quite possibly the best listener I've ever come across. And in the context of selling and how do we affect change in our customers so they do more business with us, I find listening to be one of the most important ingredients. So that is one of many reasons we were hoping to have you on the podcast today. Martin, welcome.
Thank you so much. And I always have to laugh because I still don't relate to myself as a good listener. I think it's the human condition. There's always room to improve, and the idea is just how do you keep getting present?
Mm.
And being a good listener is being present to how often you're not listening. But thank you.
Yeah, well, why don't we start? Well, I'd like to start at the beginning of how you came into the work, like, because listening for you is a practice. Yes, it's something you work on.
It is.
Okay. And what prompted you? When did this start? When did you start working on listening, and why?
Good question. I'd have to say it came in different stages. Um, One thing from a business perspective, how it started is I was sent to a negotiation skills training, and this was a
Mhm.
1 week training. It was in the UK, and it was for people who could make a difference for the company and save it money by being good negotiators. And this workshop was life-changing because I saw just how much goes on in a negotiation, how much goes on that we just don't pay attention to. And in this training, we did a lot of role playing.
Mm.
It was a revelation for me because I saw how much I had attention on what was going on between my ears. And what I learned to do is pay attention to what's going on in the other person's ears. And I found that to be a huge business advantage. And that's what got me started.
You in that 1 week training, that's where you had that aha of
Yeah. So after the 1 week training, it was the first training I'd been to where it really rearranged my head completely. So I was supposed to fly back from the UK on Friday, and I stayed into a hotel that was right near Heathrow Airport. And I
Mhm.
got up on time, and I was all packed, and I turned on the TV for a minute, and I just zoned out and just sat there. I think there was soccer on the TV, and I wasn't even watching it. I just zoned out after that week. My brain was decompressing, and so I had to get a whole other flight. I wound up spending an extra 10 hours in the airport because it just rewired my brain. And then I got home and I had a blind date the next week. And this is not something anything to do with the training, but I'm sitting in the blind date, and for the first time, I was naturally doing what the negotiator taught me to do, and I'm paying attention to her body language. There's a series from a business perspective of tells about
Mm.
when a person is, whether they're nervous, when they're anxious and they want to get a deal and they don't. And it was the first time I was on a blind date, and I'm like, oh wow, this girl's interested in me. It was just
What did you see
fun.
that you didn't know 2 weeks prior to the training? Can you share?
Yeah. Well, what always going with sports analogies, but it really works. So if you're doing a negotiation, it's not just about what do the final numbers look like. It's where are you spending most of your time? Are you spending it, in the football analogy, on the other person's, behind the other person's 50-yard line, or
Mm.
defending on your own 50-yard line? And what I found for myself is that I realized that most of my time I'm in my head. I'm thinking about my own things. I'm not thinking about the other person. And this is especially relevant to what you do, Josh, is if you're a good salesperson, you're focused on what the customer wants to talk about, not what you want to talk about. It's kind of obvious, right? But the thing about good listening is it's all about doing the obvious things. They're not that obvious.
Well, I mean, I've even experienced just in the, I don't know, 5 minutes we've been talking, my head's gone in 17 different directions and I stopped fully paying attention to everything you were saying. So is that something that you experience now in your conversations?
Absolutely. I think the difference with all the practice I've had and all the different trainings that I've had is that I don't make myself wrong for not listening. So that would be item first, item one. We're human beings and our brains are kind of like squirrels. They just go in all sorts of different directions. So if I'm talking to my wife and we're having a long conversation and my mind wanders as it does, as soon as I notice it wanders, I just go back, okay, pay attention. Oh,
Mm.
I've lost it, pay attention. And if you don't, it's an extra like 5 milliseconds to just think about, oh shit, I'm not listening. I'm supposed to be this great listener. I'm not listening.
Yeah. But it's the not making yourself wrong that is that step one. A lot of our audience, they're new to sales and they're trying to get better. They're trying to close more. I think that's how they might put it. Or how do they communicate differently or more effectively to get clients to listen to them or at least be open to their potential solution, to engender trust. And what I have found in my own work with the framework that we teach is, you can ask all the right questions, but if you're not listening to the answers and listening a certain way, they're going to feel that. They're going to feel like you're just asking questions off a checklist. So I think if I'm hearing you correctly, if I'm listening correctly, the first thing you tell a newbie or someone who's a beginner to listening work, if that's what you want to call it, is don't make yourself wrong for not listening. It's really just paying attention to when you are or not listening.
Yeah, I think the game is get out of your head and listen to what's going on in the other person. And so take a look at what the obstacles are to getting out of your own head.
Hmm.
And we have so many judgments about ourselves. And every second you're spending judging yourself is another second you're not listening.
Can you give
So,
me a practical example? Like if we were to role play, let's say I'm trying to sell you this iPhone, for example.
yeah.
Or is it,
Well, do
well,
you want to do role play?
yeah, sure. So how would you set the parameters? Because I think you have something you're trying to impart in terms of what goes on in the head.
Well, so in a sales situation, well, is this a situation where the person has a real problem? They want to buy a phone
Sure. Yeah.
or not? I
Yeah.
mean, it
Let's say
doesn't.
we're at the Verizon store and they said their phone cracked and broke and they need a new phone.
All right, I'm going to put on my Verizon uniform. All right. So, hi, Josh.
Hey, nice to meet you. My phone cracked.
Oh no. Can I
Yeah.
see?
Yeah. Right here. I just, car ran over it. I don't
Oh
think I
my
have
goodness.
insurance.
That's horrible. Have you got you said, what were you saying about insurance? You have
I
insurance?
don't think I have insurance.
Oh no. Um, that sucks. I hate when that happens. Um, that doesn't
So
look
can
like
I
it's
pause you
broken
for a
any.
second here, just to get back to tangible for the audience? When you talk about listening, and that even as the salesperson, the Verizon salesperson, what you're saying is 1,000 things are going on in your head as you're engaging me, and you're just noticing that, or what's the tactical, tangible practice?
Okay, so somebody's coming into your store. One place you could go is, I've got to sell 10 of these today. And you could be thinking about, shoot, we've got a promotion for, I don't know, this new Google phone, and this person's on an iPhone. Can I move them? Can I move them? They're going to really stick with the iPhone. All those different things. And if I hit 10 today, I'm going to get my bonus. And my daughter's birthday is coming up, and that'd be really nice to have that bonus.
And all of that's going on in our heads after.
Yeah.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you? So for me, what I've learned to do is focus on the person I'm listening to. And like, okay, like put all that aside and focus. So the first thing I see is that, okay, you ran over your phone. First thing is like, that's horrible. If I'm buying a phone and I'm looking at my ruined phone, like I'm not ready to let that go. I'm mourning that, right? I'm mourning my phone.
Mm.
Yeah. So you could go into solution mode if you're in the Verizon store and go, oh, do you have everything on your iCloud and back it up? But really what I'm getting in that particular situation is this person, something ran over his phone. Are you okay? What's going on with you? And give the person a space to mourn their phone.
Mm. Be with them.
Yeah. What's going on for you, Josh? Your phone just got ran over. That's horrible. Is everything okay?
Is it empathy or is it something different?
It's curiosity and empathy. Like, why
Remaining.
are they in your store? So when someone comes into a store, you'll notice, I get this a lot from my clients, is they need a new phone. But if somebody ran over their phone, really what they need to do is tell the story, their tell a woe. Now, maybe they already told it to somebody and they're ready to move on, but maybe not. Like, can you believe this is $1,000 phone? It just got run over. I have no insurance.
Okay, let's stop there for a second. I want to unpack that. How do you know that a human needs to tell the story in the phone example? Like, what is that experience, or can you dissect that for us a little bit?
Well, if you're role playing accurately, then I'll hear it in your voice.
Okay,
My phone just got run over, Josh. Why are you here? My goddamn phone just got run. I'm exaggerating, right? How
sure,
did
but
I
how
find
do
the
you know they're
phone?
not just angry? I mean, I'm not challenging you. What I'm really trying to understand is how do you know, is it through experience that people have the need to express themselves, or what?
My experience tell me that people have the need to express themselves, but each individual, like if you just keep practicing, you know, what is it that you think, like you're in the way of what you really know. You're interacting with another human being. You know, I mean,
This seems like a lot of work, a lot of patience.
it's not a lot of work. The work is getting everything out of the way.
Okay. Can you expand on that? Getting everything out of the way.
If you are present with somebody else, you will hear so much. If you've ever gone, if you know, I know you're married, and you have a beautiful daughter, but there was a time when you were dating your wife where there was just that magic you had with her, right?
Hmm. I still
And
do. I know what you mean.
yeah, you still do. Um, and in the beginning, it was new. It wasn't just magic. It was you
Yeah,
didn't take it for granted.
yeah, exactly.
And there's something about how you guys interacted that like she had the experience, you really got her.
Mm. Because
And you had the
I
experience,
was
she really
paying
gets you.
attention. I was
Okay, so
listening.
what did you learn when you were paying attention?
About my wife, she's very charismatic. She's charming. She has an incredible sense of humor. She's goofy. She sees little things and makes fun little wordplay out of things that are just seemingly, like, yeah.
It was a lot of work finding that out,
No, yeah, I see where you're going with this. Wow. Yeah, you're just with her because you're really
right?
curious, what you just said earlier, curiosity. So is the practice then being that curious with everyone you're in conversation with?
Yeah.
And what do
Every
you,
human being has something to surprise and delight you if you pay attention.
okay. So I had an assistant of mine just call me about 20 minutes before we started this podcast, and I wasn't on the call, but so it might not be a great use case. He was talking to an IT resource and they beat him up. They were very upset about some technical specs and vulnerabilities they found in IT infrastructure. And this individual called me and said, look, that was really contentious. I just want to forewarn you, that was a really bad call. And when I asked him a few more questions, what he expressed to me was that the potential client, the IT infosec guy, came at him pretty hard. And his first question, well, are you sales or are you IT? And my team member said, well, I'm IT. And then this person looked up his LinkedIn and started reading it off and says, this sure sounds like your sales. So in that instance, how do you listen differently, or how do you be curious? Did you
Yeah,
catch?
so when you say am I IT, what do you mean by that?
Well, do you have background in information technology? Are you InfoSec? Because this resume reads like you're a salesperson.
Right. Totally get that. So I relate to myself like I'm an IT person, but like you, I've met IT people that know way more than I do. I know enough to be able to do sales support. So I consider myself an IT person, but there's some IT people that, don't think I'm all that.
Hmm. I'm not clear what you did there.
Okay. Well, what was your experience?
That you were mollifying me. You were
Well,
just
the
trying to,
question I'm asking, like, okay, what was the question behind the question?
I, without having been on the call, he was probably, the IT resource was, I suspect, annoyed and short-tempered that he was wasting his time.
When I've been in that situation as an IT person, I ask you, and there was something bad that happened in the sales.
Mhm.
What I'm asking you is it fair for me to beat you up or not? Are you supposed to know this stuff or not? That was the question I heard in the question. What is that? Was that there? Am I accurate?
I don't know because I wasn't there, but you're probably right. But how, again, I guess I go back to this, and your reading of the tea leaves, that the question behind the question is that just because you've been listening for a long time and practicing this, that you sort of see patterns in human behavior and how we communicate, that you're able to hear.
I mean, some of that is experience, and some of this I'm just going off of what you're saying.
Mhm.
There's an amazing amount of information you can get from secondhand conversations. If you get, you're not going to get more than your assistant got in the conversation, but you can get all the information that the assistant had by really being with your assistant.
Which I was not. I was checking email and looking at my schedule for the rest of the afternoon. Just another. So you know, so many questions here. Let me ask you, going back, a few minutes here. If the teaser of this podcast is how can listening benefit someone's life?
In the sales specifically, or just in life?
Just in life.
If you want to get really philosophical, the way I look at life is the only life that counts is the life I'm present for. And when you're listening, you're present, so you're enjoying life. Uh, I can't see any more benefit than that.
And what has stood in your way?
What stands in one's way, and specifically in my way, is all this all this mechanisms between my ears. For me, like, what is so attractive about listening, what's so attractive about conversation, is that you really can get beyond your brain. You can find out what's going on in other people's lives, what's going on in the community by being in communication.
Hmm.
So I don't know. Like, I don't think human beings are meant to be solitary creatures. We're not plants. We require when we're little, we require parents to help us survive beyond our adolescence. And then we require If we want to reproduce, we require a mate. And really, in order to live the way we've lived for hundreds of thousands of years, you need a community. And so if you're living just by yourself in your own head, it's a lonely place to live. So
And how has it benefited you in your sales or
it's a superpower. When you listen to people, they just love being listened to because you're so rarely listened to in this world. When someone could just listen to you, then you can get on with life. So using the example of this person that goes into the Verizon store, they really do need a new phone.
Hmm.
And given that it got run over, like the last phone didn't end well, they may have some ideas that they may be open to new ways of looking at their phone situation. But in order to like be ready for wherever they're at, they have to let go of what just happened to them.
Hmm.
So I'll use another example. One of the things that like in medical care, a nurse or a doctor that listens it's like a superpower for them as well. Um, I remember when a year ago I had a tooth extracted, and so I don't know about you, but for me it was just like a just having something that's part of your body removed,
Yeah,
and
I
above
went
and
through that.
beyond the pain,
It's brutal.
right? It's freaky. So the doctor, like he extracted it, the dental surgeon, he said, "Thank you, Martin. Let me know if you have any questions." And he was out the door before I could even process what he said. And then the dental assistant gave me the instructions about what I'm supposed to do. And then he went off. And I just like put on his hand and I go, okay, I cannot hear a single thing you said. Can you slowly say everything you just said? So he repeated it and I heard it this time. Can you write that down for me? Yes, he wrote it down so I knew what I was supposed to do. But because they're doing that all day long, they don't get this. For me, this is traumatic to some level. For them, it's a Tuesday, right?
Hmm.
And so having the skill of listening, the first thing is to understand where someone's at, right? So don't give me a bunch of instructions about how to care for my mouth when I'm not listening. You could pay attention, look somebody in the eye and know, okay, that person's not listening to a word I'm saying. So as a salesperson, do not talk to people who are not listening. And by the way, that's really good in, personal relationships as well. Don't talk to people who aren't listening. And so if you pay attention to whether people are listening to you or not, that'll be a huge difference in the amount of communication you're able to do.
And if you notice someone's not listening to you while you're talking to them, what's a way to snap them back in? Is there anything you found effective or?
I stop talking and then I breathe and I look at them. And then it's kind of like a movie's going on in their head. And then they just kind of, their
Wait,
eyes kind
what?
of
Oh,
sleep.
yeah. Yeah. The radio
Right?
of your voice stops and they have to be, oh, where am I?
What's going on? Right? And then you don't say anything to them. You don't like call attention to, you haven't been listening to me. You just, so, and then just continues talking and then they're listening to you.
Well, yeah, that is effective. It's a good one.
Yeah.
If you were to, know, be able to broadcast a message to the world about the power of listening and what it's done for you and how it could help others, and share something, and you know that everybody would hear it and really listen to it, what would you want people to know?
Take your time and be curious. Everything else follows from that. There's nowhere to go, there's nowhere to be. Just be present.
Hmm. Good advice in our modern world. I've had
Yes.
5 phone calls while we've been on this podcast and the pinging, yeah.
Yeah.
And I recognize the paradox or irony of that, doing a podcast, interviewing someone who's a great listener and asking them to talk the whole time. When you're working with
Greatest talker. So.
when you're working with coaches or facilitating, what are some of the exercises you run people through? Things like that.
So when I work with people, what I try to do is get them to put themselves in somebody else's shoes.
Okay.
So if I want to teach somebody to listen, I want them to have the experience of what it's like when someone isn't listening to them. And then when they are. And
Hmm.
what's the difference? How does it feel for you? Okay. Well, how does it feel for your customer?
Okay.
And when I'm role playing, when let's say if I'm facilitating for 50 people or more, uh, there's a life of its own that an audience has. And there's a way to be listening to an audience. There's tricks of the trade, like, key on a couple of people in the audience, this person on the left side, this person way in the back, this person on the right. But the energy of the group as a whole, you can hear it. Even if they're not talking, you can hear it in their breathing. As you're looking at people, are they with you or are they not with you? And now so much more so when everyone's got phones. If your entire audience is doing this, you ain't got them.
Hmm. Can I go back to when you're working with coachees and you give them the experience of not being listened to and then the experience of being listened to? One of the things I hear a lot is, okay, Josh, I can ask these questions, and within the revenue doctor framework, but I'm not getting anything back in terms of an answer. I'm getting closed answers or yeah, sure. They might say, I'm not getting the answers I want, right? How might you coach someone up? Like what's not occurring in that circumstance?
They're talking to people who aren't listening. So you're on a sales call with someone that doesn't know you.
Hmm.
You're a salesperson, you have a certain kind of personality. The other person is a buyer of some kind.
Yeah.
Likely they're not a salesperson. So they may be awkward in this situation. They may not want to talk to anybody. I know you talk about sales resistance a lot. So I'm a typical buyer. Put me in a room with a salesperson. Okay, my resistance goes up, period. So when resistance goes up, you're not listening.
And
So
so what would be the remedy?
so give me an example of a question. What's one question your students say?
If you're selling, investment advisory services, you might ask a potential client, well, do you feel good about your current retirement portfolio? If you're selling real estate, do you like where you live? If you're selling mortgages, are you happy with your interest rate? Are you happy with your existing mortgage? That's a typical pain point question we teach. Do you like what you have?
Yeah.
And they may hear, well, yeah, sure, it's okay. Or,
Yeah. So the trouble with those pain point questions or those exploratory questions is until you've got rapport, what you're kind of saying is sometimes what you're saying is, are you happy with your portfolio? What they hear is, are you stupid? Have you made any money? Do you know how to invest? If
mm,
you're talking to someone that's an expert advisor, like there's nothing embarrassing. I would hope you're better at investing than I am, right? So if you're asking those kind of questions, on the one hand, they're perfectly good questions to ask, and the person isn't going to go, well, that's rude, or that's kind of an evasive question, right? Kind of depends on who you are. If you're a medical
yeah,
doctor and you say, let me see what that cut under your nose is, you'll show them. But if you're in a regular conversation, well, don't, it's my personal space. Don't look at my nose, right? So if you're an investment, if I come to you at a cocktail party and say, or how's your portfolio? Is it up or down? You may not want to answer that question. But if you're talking to an investment advisor, it's natural you're going to ask that question. However, you don't have rapport yet. So you're sometimes going to ask the question and the person's going to lie to you or deflect, even though they want the help.
Yeah. And so how are you listening differently, or how are you using your training to affect change?
Well, I'm listening to the answer they're giving me, and then I breathe.
And you love
So
it.
a lot of breathing and listening. So I take a breath.
A lot of not, I'm asking you, how are you talking when you're listening? But it's really a lot of not talking.
So they say something, and you're listening, and you're like, okay, they didn't really open up. Ask the question a different way and give them space. Like ask them slowly. Okay, so you're pretty happy with your portfolio. Is there any part of your portfolio you wish could be doing better? Which I know is in your framework, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or
But even the
what?
way you just asked that, it's a different meaning behind it. Then, hey, do you like your portfolio? It's very different. So what did you just do when you slowed down?
I'm trying to get a read from the person about what are the, like, it might be, for example, when I'm asking the question, I'm making a ton of money on my Amazon stock, but I got a really nice uptick with this AI company that I bought. I really like investing in that company. That I made, $2,000 on it so far, but I'm really excited about it, right?
Yeah.
So when I'm asking the question, I'm getting yeah, okay. I've had Amazon stock for years and it's doing great, but that's not the interesting conversation piece, right? So you find out that, oh yeah, I really like, oh, so you like AI. Oh, okay. So you've been investing in AI? I have. Oh, how do you decide what to invest in AI? I don't know. I just go with my gut. Oh, well, you really understand AI. What's your favorite AI? Oh, I really like Claude. Okay. Then you get back to your framework, but you're engaging the person like they're a human being and they forget they're talking to a salesperson.
As opposed to having an agenda, which even in this podcast, I'll cop to, like, I'm like, oh, I got to ask this question. I got to ask this question, or the answers he's giving me aren't what I thought he was going to give me. So I got to, and what I'm really hearing you say is you ask a question and you just be with the answer. Because Martin, I've seen you lead facilitations and workshops. We've worked together, and maybe it's a few hours into the workshop, and everyone's still kind of tight. And within 20 minutes, an hour of you facilitating, it's like a collective amongst the group. And I guess I'm asking how, I keep asking the same question. I think you keep telling me the answer, but I'm not maybe listening. I don't know. But how are you doing that? How are you getting people to, we talk about sales resistance at the Revenue Doctor. How are you getting people to lower their resistance, whether it's in a selling conversation or even just communication in general? How are you getting someone to stop, putting up roadblocks and start listening to you?
Um, okay, so let's get into maybe something that's a little bit more technical because I think that's what you're asking.
Are you clear on what I'm asking?
I'm clear on what you're asking.
Okay.
What you want to know is it. Let me. I think see, I wasn't doing being a good listener there. I thought I knew something, right? But maybe you're asking something different than I think. So let me check. So what you've noticed is that I'll be in front of an audience. They'll be tense. They'll be jittery. They're just not into it. And I talk
Mhm.
to them for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and then all of a sudden they're totally into it. How do I do that?
Yes. And to add to that, it's not like it's the beginning of a seminar, or they've been there for a minute, or even I've seen you do coaching work where someone might be tense and then they sort of disarm. Yes, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah. So humans want completion. When something is incomplete for them, they can't let it go. So if you've seen the Bugs Bunny cartoons with the classical music, where you know there's a dun da 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 na, and then they don't say dun dun,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's been a while, but yeah.
Yeah. So like musically, the artists play on that all the time. In classical music, it's the dominant versus the tonic, and the dominant is very powerful, and then the tonic resolves it. And so famously, if you're into classical music, the Brandenburg concertos all work
Mhm.
on that, where it weaves, 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 and finally resolves, right? And so it's that way. Why on a date do people talk about their exes all the time instead of talking about something that's more fruitful? Because they can't let go of, they're in a romantic situation, they can't let go of what happened with their ex. So going back to your iPhone situation, right? I assert that they're not going to buy another phone until they get complete about what happened with their iPhone. They got run over, right? So help people get past that. So what I'm doing with an audience is I'm looking to see what is it they can't get past. So maybe I or another facilitator talked about something and it's really bothering them. And so I'll work at resolving it for them. And I'll say something like, hey, I noticed that Josh talked about this thing around sales that's really bothering. It's like, it's hard to believe. Like, what do you guys think about this sales resistance thing?
Mm.
Hard to believe that that's really what's keeping me from selling, isn't it?
It's
Right?
sort of like you're addressing what I'm calling the elephant in the room head on.
Yeah. I'm finding elephants. I'm an elephant finder and
The
an
elephant,
elephant, right?
big game hunter.
Right? And I'm an elephant resolver. Like, good, you give him a couple of peanuts, okay, he's off into the next room.
Mm. And is it the same, in your experience selling your services? You do a lot of different types of coaching. Are you approaching it the same way, or are how are you listening in that way? And I'm not interested in, I know you and I have worked together on some of the training we do here at the Revenue Doctor. I'm actually just genuinely interested in your listening skills in a sales framework, not necessarily what you've learned or from our work together.
Well, what's really interesting, and you and I go back and forth on this all the time. Um, when I first started getting pretty good at listening, I resolved that I'm going to listen all the time, everywhere. Like I want to be someone that you talk to me, I'm listening.
Mm.
And what I discovered is in a sales in a sales situation, in a romantic situation, in a leadership situation, listening is an incredible skill. But there'll be times when you're best served not to listen. So, for example, in the framework, you talk about creating a new future for people and them understanding, wow, when you buy this product or service, it's going to make a huge difference. And then you've got a section where you have people contemplated, well, is it that important to you? What if we didn't do this? And they grapple with what it would look like to take it away. It's
Mm.
the same thing with listening. If all you're doing is listening all the time, sometimes you don't move forward. So in sales, I have to, listening is incredibly important. It's incredibly useful. But if all I'm doing in listening, I'm not creating enough, even in coaching as well, I got to create enough friction for them to want to do something about it.
Change.
I
You
don't,
want, yeah, you have to affect change in them.
yeah,
Yeah. So the listening is disarming them enough that they feel like you've heard them so that they're open to creating the effective change.
yes.
Interesting.
But what I've learned is there's more to life than just listening. Listening is really, really important, but there's times when you want to do something a little different.
Wonderful. This has been very valuable for me. Are there anything else that you'd like to share?
Well, this is kind of a tangent, but I had a friend who also went with me into a lot of the listening learning that we had. And he talked about how much he could apply what he learned in music to listening. And so I would say to people who are really good musically, apply what you've learned in music to talking. How do you create tension? How do you how do you create interest? What is a hook? I'm not incredibly gifted in music, so I may not be using the right terms. But one thing I've noticed is how those skills are transferable. Some of the great salespeople and some of the great listeners are really great musicians. And so
Mm.
I'd say if you've got music chops, look and see how you can use them to
Mm.
good effect.
To bridge the gap.
Yeah.
Martin, where we'll put in the show notes where people can find you. If are there any trainings or books you would recommend for folks listening out here who want to sharpen their tools? We'll let them know how they can be in touch with you if they're interested in coaching. But any public resources you would recommend?
Any public resources I'd recommend? Um, Not at this time.
Okay. Any good books on listening that you found effective, or may
I'd
just
say
follow you?
if you want to be a good, so there's a lot of books on listening, and I didn't find any of them to, um, the best book on listening I can think of is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is a very old book about
Yeah.
it. Yeah. So I
Is
love
this?
books. I love reading books. The frustrating thing for me about books is they're not a conversation.
Yeah, so it's a one-way intake. I remember from Stephen Covey's The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, one of the habits was seek first to understand, then be understood. I- Have you read one? Have you read that book?
I have. I like it. It's a good book.
Is that idea of seeking first to understand, then be understood kind of in the context of what we're talking about, or is it totally different game?
I think that is the same idea. He just comes at it differently.
Yeah, what I noticed in myself was like if I'm talking to my wife and I'm like, okay, I'm going to understand her. I'm going to definitely understand her. But like then like, okay, I understood you, now understand me. And I don't find that to be a very effective technique. Um, and I don't think that's what you're telling me to do, right? Or like with a client, like, okay, I'm going to understand you, now listen to me. Not effective. You're saying something different. Yeah.
Well, okay, so the way you're saying that it sounds transactional, right?
Yes. That's
So,
exactly right. It feels transactional because really what I want her to do is understand me. I'm
right.
not so interested in understanding her, which, okay.
So the transaction doesn't work.
Yeah.
What you have to do is let go of her understanding you long enough to actually listen to her.
Mm.
Lose yourself in listening to her.
And how do you practice listening when you find yourself in a heightened state, whether it be in a communication with your spouse or a customer or a coach who might be aggrieved about something? Because there are times in the day where you're just like at a higher emotional state or you're aggravated or annoyed and you still have to listen. Like, what do you do?
I recommend having teenagers. It's just an incredible training tool. Having children in general, being married, being in a relationship, because you got incredible opportunities. So the thing is not you have opportunities all the time. It's how are you going to be about it? Are you going to see times with your loved ones as an obligation or an opportunity? Hey, this is my chance to get better at this. And okay, so let's talk about, okay, I listen to them, so they'll listen to me. Transactionally, it doesn't work. But
Mhm.
what happens practically is if you really, really, really listen to them, their mind is clear. And then when you talk, they're listening. Not because you listen to them, but because they're clear.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's a practice.
It's a practice.
Well, Martin, thank you. This was wonderful. It was very helpful.
Thank
And
you so much, Josh.
as I said earlier, we'll put in the show notes where people can find you and how they can get in touch with you.
Awesome. Thank you.